we will move on to the third presenter. Third presenter Ilse is a talk on the biodiversity conservation, bioculture protocols, and access and benefit sharing. Please proceed. Ilse.
My presentation.
Yes, proceed.
Yes. After such a brilliant presentation by Saverio and Sergi before, I'm afraid my presentation is going to be a little bit dry because it goes about biodiversity conservation, biocultural protocols, and access and benefit sharing. And I have to go back a little bit into the Convention on Biological Diversity, which was negotiated in 1992 at the Rio Conference, and it has the three main objectives of the conservation of biological diversity, the sustainable use of the components of biological diversity, and the fair and equitable sharing of the benefits arising out of the utilization of genetic resources. So these are the three pillars of the Convention on Biological Diversity, which are supposed to sustain biological diversity. The Convention on Biological Diversity, it made the following provisions, I think, and which may have been a little bit of a mistake. First of all, it declared state sovereignty of genetic resources. So it's the state actually who owns the genetic resources. And it's the state who have to facilitate access to their genetic resources. That's also a requirement of the CBD. And this is exactly the problem as I see it, because the state often undertakes activities which are actually undermining genetic resources. As we see for pastoralists, pastoralists usually don't have a conducive environment for them, but they are the ones who are actually conserving the domestic animal diversity, but governments very often undermine their survival and long-term conservation. Now, what is access and benefit sharing? So access and benefit sharing, or short ABS, is to the way in which genetic resources and their use are shared between the people or countries that provide them. And it was so-called developing countries, or the countries in the global source, because that's where actually most of the biological diversity is maintained at this stage. And because, on the other hand, the technological potential and capacity to commercialize this biological diversity was located in countries of the north, in Europe, in the US, and in Australia. So there was a definite situation of biopiracy at some stage, which the use, so this mechanism of access and benefit originated, and it was also supposed to be an incentive for biodiversity conservation, because in exchange, the countries who were providing the biological diversity were receive help with biotechnology, and also they were supposed to kind of get social and economic welfare in exchange for granting access to their biodiversity. This was the theory, the thinking. In practice, so access and benefit sharing, it's based on the concept of prior informed consent, which the provider has to give to a user, And this is based on negotiations between both parties to develop mutually agreed terms, or MAT, to ensure the fair. So prior informed consent, or PIC, is the permission given by the competent national authority of a provider country to a user prior to accessing genetic resources, in line with an appropriate national legal and institutional framework. So every country had to develop their own specific laws for giving prior informed consent and providing access, and for how they were implementing the Convention on Biological Diversity. This was up to each country itself. And then the mutually agreed terms were the result of an agreement negotiated between the providers and the users. And it explicitly put in writing how, under which conditions access would be provided. So here is the same situation again in pretty pictures. So biological resources, they can be either in situ, found within ecosystems and natural habitats, or they could be ex situ, held in botanical gardens or university collections. And you already see here, this both refers to wild kinds of biodiversity. It does not include agricultural biodiversity, although it is acknowledged that traditional knowledge is important and that this should be considered. The uses of the biological diversity are divided into non-commercial, just for research purposes, for taxonomic identification, for conservation, and for inclusion in collections, or for commercial uses by means of biotechnology or developing pharmaceuticals. Actually, development of pharmaceuticals was kind of the mindset on which the whole CBD was built, because that was an important situation at that time, that indigenous people, for instance, in Latin America, had knowledge about the therapeutic qualities of certain plants or so, and then this based on that knowledge, scientists and explorers came and took those biological resources and then took them back to their home countries and patented them. So it was based on that concept of basically of pharmaceutical items. And so in exchange for making the biological resources available, there could be benefits which could be either monetary, or they could be non-monetary in terms of research and development support or support for communities. But the problem with the CBD was that actually all the power was with governments. And whereas 80% of the planet's biodiversity is located in community-held territories, in the ICAs, as we heard about in the first presentation. So it was a situation that actually these communities, who were the ones who were actually stewarding the resources, whereas governments were often doing something to undermine conservation, so they did not get any benefits from when a government decided to provide access to genetic resources. And this was, even though the CBD in the paragraph 8J, it's a very famous paragraph that says, subject to national legislation, respect, preserve, and maintain knowledge, innovations, and practices of indigenous and local communities, embodying traditional lifestyles relevant for the conservation and sustainable use of biological diversity, and promote their wider application with the approval and involvement of the holders of such knowledge, innovations, and practices, and encourage the equitable sharing of the benefits arising from the utilization of such knowledge, innovations, and practices. So this was the idea. I mean, the idea was there that communities could benefit, but it wasn't really implemented. And that's why in 2010, the Nagoya Protocol was decided upon, which try to kind of rectify that lack and further specified how about the access to biological resources and how the fair and equitable sharing of the benefits should really happen. And in the Nagoya Protocol, traditional knowledge of local communities is giving quite some importance. And in its paragraph, Article 12, the Nagoya Protocol says that parties shall endeavor to support as appropriate the development by indigenous and local communities, including women, of community protocols in relation to access to traditional knowledge associated with genetic resources and the fair and equitable sharing of benefits. So the parties to the convention, which are the nations, the governments, are encouraged here to support the development of community protocols, although again, it's not an absolute mandate. It's again up to each country to develop their own guidelines on how to implement this. Anyway, the fact that communities were suddenly recognized and that they had the opportunity to develop these protocols was, for us people working with pastoralists, was like we thought it was a major step forward, because now we can show and document the real role of pastoralists in conserving biological diversity and in having developed these breeds of livestock. So we were thinking at that time, I mean, biological community protocols are a tool to ensure that communities receive benefits providing access to the genetic resources and the knowledge that they steward. It's not moving anymore. Excuse me. Ah, there. So we have a network of organizations here in India, and we started, documenting breeds kept by different communities, and we thought this was a major step forward, and we try to document all the knowledge that goes into the development of these breeds, just as Saverio was explaining the whole concept and thinking that goes into it, that it's not about producing like a standardized breed like you have in scientific animal breeding, but that you develop herds that have a variety of characteristics in them, and that also where other things are much more important than the actual performance, where it's about the closeness of the animals to the herder, about their willingness to cooperate in a herd, to have nice social behavior, to have good feeding behavior. All these things we try to document, of course, trying to have the community being in the lead. The purpose of the what we called, originally biocultural community protocols in the CBD, they only refer to as community protocols. So it was to ensure that benefits of access and benefit sharing agreements get channeled back to the communities, to strengthen the role of the indigenous and local communities versus the state, and to also create clarity of community role consent. The problem is that actually, the whole CBD is built on that concept of giving a resource, a genetic resource to another country, and then it's developed by some company into a commercial product. And with livestock breeds, this concept actually does not, it doesn't work, because there is no interest by developing countries or by the industries in the genetic resources, which are actually not genetic resources, as Saverio tried to explain, but they are a composite. There's a genetic base, but there's a lot of learned behavior also. And these breeds, they can only function in the environment in which they have been developed, because they are part of the environment. So you can't just take them out to another country. They will not work. Nevertheless, we set out, the LIFE network is a group of NGOs here in India, and we set out to work with the communities and to document these breeds. We also brought out a little booklet called Community Protocols, and where we actually, for the first time, we made clear that pastoralists are not just passively raising animals, but they are actively manipulating them, because the thinking in the animal science circles was also that pastoralists just let their animals reproduce, that these breeds are just product of their environment, and that no knowledge is involved. This was really the thinking. So we actually did in India document put together quite a few biocultural protocols. The first one was from the Raika community in Rajasthan, which is taking care or has developed a number of camel breeds, as well as cattle, sheep, and goat breeds. And it was a very good process of getting people together and of bringing their knowledge to the table and exchanging it, and then finally putting it on paper. And these are some of the biocultural protocols that were developed in India. The Raika, the Bani Maldari in Gujarat to keep the Bani buffalo, and there's also the Rebari and Jat community in Kochi and Rai camels. There were the Bargo hill cattle in Tamil Nadu, Attapati goat breeders from Kerala, Puliculum cattle breeders from Tamil Nadu. There was one community protocol done in for the Pashtun people in Pakistan. The Samburu in Kenya developed the red Maasai sheep, and the Gola, the Ganjam goat in India, that wasn't finalized as far as I know. Also, for the Kuruba who herd the sheep on the Deccan Plateau, also started a community protocol. But it's actually a very long process. It's not something that happens very fast. It takes months actually for the community to understand what's going on and to collect the knowledge. So yeah, and so working here in Rajasthan, one issue is that the camel is becoming extinct. And it's becoming extinct because there's no more value to it. It has lost its transport function. It cannot be used for meat due to the legal situation here. And there was no camel milk market, and it was even illegal to sell milk. So the camel had totally lost its purpose. And we were trying to, by means of establishing the community protocol, we were trying to make the case that we're going to need this animal for the future because it's adapted to climate change. It can produce milk under very difficult circumstances. It's a way of adding value to the desert vegetation. And in order to conserve it, we need the support for building up value chains around the camel. And if people start again making income from camels, then the animal will also conserve. But somehow it didn't, this community protocol is there, but it hasn't really had a lot of impact so far. So in conclusion, yes, I just want to, community protocols are a great idea, but they're not actually, they are very difficult and to put together, and they take time. And there's a danger that somebody comes in from the outside and just wants to do, a community protocol to do for the sake of it, and takes some notes and then puts it together and then says this is a community protocol when it's actually not. So BCPs, they require engagement, dialogue, and participation of the community. They take time, but they are an important way of empowering communities, and we really should bring them to the forefront in order to support pastoralists and also conserve the production systems actually. Yeah, so we have 10 years of more than 10 years of practical experience with these community protocols, and they are valuable, but they don't for animal genetic resources or breeds. They don't really fulfill the purpose that much, because in order to conserve these breeds, we need value chains, we need access to land and all these things, rather than giving them out of the country and somebody developing some commercial pharmaceutical product from them. And when the CBD was originally conceived, people were not thinking of agricultural biodiversity. They were just thinking of wild biodiversity that can be taken away and then developed. So it's unfortunate. We've also been pushing for an international treaty on animal genetic resources, but there is no international interest on this, because it took a long time to develop the international treaty on plant genetic resources, and so governments were kind of frustrated by the process. But pastoralists and the biodiversity they steward is extremely important, because they are the ones who combine food production with the conservation of biological diversity. So we need to do everything that to support them. And there's hope that there'll be an international year of rangeland pastoralism in 2026, I think, and maybe that will help to get recognition for them. Yes, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Ilse, for your nice presentation on the biodiversity conservation, bioculture protocols, access and benefit sharing aspects of this animal diversity in the world. So as you mentioned that CBD has created different norms, NEOG protocol and different protocols. So under this 92 and conservation of biodiversity conference, conservation of domestic genetic diversity and access benefit sharing, world biodiversity distribution is not equal and it is disproportionate, and the ABS is based on the priority informed consent and being granted to the providers of livestock. And then NEOG protocol, it supports development of indigenous people's participation and women empowerment. The bioculture examples are given in Indian Rajasthan, and clearly it was mentioned different aspects of local peoples and this conservation aspect, their participation in conservation. For example, cattle in different groups of people in India, particularly camel in Rajasthan. Now it is under loss. The diversity is losing. So this is very difficult. People's participation is very important, and more these all aspects government management is very difficult, because it takes more than 10 years. People's participation and all these things, then women empowerment is very essential. And then at the most, it very interesting topic, and thanks for her nice presentation.